Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I just wanted to stop by and congratulate the genre guys for the electricity that they have brought to this channel. I am hearing from so many people that they love this kind of content, and it's been wonderful watching these guys take apart some of the great classic films that remind us of what entertainment once was. It's depressing to cover all of the negativity all the time that Hollywood is doing now, and these guys take us back to a golden age, an era of fun and excellence. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation right now. Tommy Tables, it's time again for you to take over and lead this conversation. Lou, Lorn, thank you so much for all of your efforts.
When you called it electricity, I thought you were going to tell us how many gigawatts.
Those are gigawatts, Lou. Those are gigawatts.
Well, thank you so much, Pro, and likewise, thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's been really great being able to catch up on some classics and some movies that, some of us had never seen. Cough, cough. Now, before we get started, I do appreciate all the comments that people have been leaving on the videos that we've been posting about the genre guys. It's been fantastic reading the feedback. Leave us your thoughts, like I say all the time. Give us your ideas of what you'd like to see us cover next, like types of movies, genres, of course, various actual movies. We're open to it all. And today we are going to be covering the last the last Starfighter movie. This is a film which you might guess from my little tagline, I would say took a bit of inspiration from Star Wars. What do you guys think? All that to be said, it was a film that came out after Star Wars. It was a film that was unfortunately what we might call a bomb. It came out in 1984, but it ended up becoming a cult classic, and it's still remembered today. People still like it, and it was actually, as I think Lou will get into, really revolutionary with respect to the special effects that it used for the time. So, guys, I'm gonna give you just a quick heads up. I'd never seen this movie. No, I'm kidding. I have seen this movie before. Sorry, that was a bad joke.
We finally found one.
But I did rewatch it again, and well, let's take it away. The Last Starfighter, a little bit of a sci-fi. What do we call this? A Star Wars clone? Not a clone. Inspired by Star Wars? I think I'm raising half.
I would say it got made because of Star Wars, in the sense that they put up the money because, oh boy, we'll have another one of those. You might call it a flop in the sense that it didn't make Star Wars kinds of money, but for $14, $13, $15 million to make it, it made 27 or 28, so it came out ahead, but not the way they'd hoped it would.
So the budget was $15 million, and the box office was $29 million in North America. You are right. So it didn't lose money. They pretty much almost doubled their investment on that. So yeah, maybe it wasn't a flop after all.
Yeah, I don't think that it's one that many people would consider a classic per se, but it is. As I was watching it yesterday when I was a kid, I watched this movie over and over, and I loved it. And it primarily had to do with Centauri, Robert Preston's character, just because I liked his voice. But I didn't really remember a lot of this movie until I rewatched it last night. And I was kind of cringing a little bit as I was watching it, because you can see that it didn't really have a huge budget. The acting is not stellar out of this world, but it's not an offensive movie. It's kind of fun, and my son actually was watching it and having a great time, and that's the audience it's targeted towards. So if it's entertaining its audience, who am I to complain about it?
Yeah, exactly, and it was Robert Preston's last movie, which is a shame, but he certainly went out in style with this, and it was certainly written around his famous character of the Music Man, as far as being the kind of positive huckster. I learned a very curious little piece of 6 degrees of separation about Robert Preston doing a little research. Robert Preston's birth name was Robert Preston Messervy, Meservey. Do you know who else's name was Messervy? No relation, because it's a fictional character. Miles Messervy, Admiral Sir Miles Messervy, was in Fleming's M in the James Bond movies. That's where the M came from, was his name.
No kidding.
So I wonder whether, Fleming knew somebody in Preston's family and got that name from there. You'll never know, but it's kind of a fascinating connection. The other interesting connection is that Lance Guest, who is the last Starfighter, his father was a Navy fighter pilot. So how did that feel for him making this movie with all that resonation? So,
well, before we get too deep into this, for the sake of the audience, why don't we give a little bit of an overview of the plot? How about I start, and then maybe Lorn, do you want to take it away, Lorn? How about that?
I suppose I can. The plot is pretty basic. It's your standard hero's journey story where you have this kid who's living in a trailer park and bored with his life, having to do menial tasks on the Tatooine farm, or in this case, rehooking up electricity and aerial antennas for the tenants of the trailer park.
And it's still there, by the way.
Who dreams of a life of adventure somewhere elsewhere. And the main preoccupation that he has when he's not doing menial tasks around the trailer park is playing this arcade game that exhorts you as you pass by it. It says, "Greetings, Starfighter. You're being recruited to try and fend off the armadas of Zur and his Kodan Armada." And he spends all his time playing this game, and a crowd develops around him one night when he's about to beat the high score. When that happens, it's revealed that essentially this was a test from these aliens who are actually trying to fend off the Kodan Armada, and they need a stellar starfighter pilot to be able to help them do that. And so they recruit this character, and he sort of, he does the typical hero thing where he denies the call and wants to go back, and then is convinced otherwise over time so that he can help fend off this alien invasion force and save the day. It's a pretty basic hero's journey plot line, but you see elements of that in a lot of adventure storytelling, and I think that using a video game as the gatekeeping mechanism to find the hero is something that has resonated in movies ever since this movie came out. It's been used a number of times.
And allegedly, the Air Force has actually done it for people to run these drones out of Nellis Air Force Base that are around the world, training people and finding people via video games who have an aptitude for it.
No kidding. Well, it's very Ender's Game-ish, isn't it, in a way?
Well, and you also have to remember that was, the age of all of these very simple arcade games. In fact, I read that Atari, you'll see in the credits at the end, coming soon, the Atari game, they planned on making an arcade game based on this, but then pulled out when the movie didn't make enough money. Well, the original merch tie-in, so to speak, of the early days of Star Cinema.
It is one of the interesting things about the movie that when they're showing the arcade game, which is simulating the interface that he'll use in his Gunstar ship, arcade games of that era couldn't reproduce this kind of but to the audience it looked amazing at the time. Now you'd look at it and go, it's kind of like the Elijah Wood character in Back to the Future 2. It's like, you have to use your hands? That's a baby's toy.
No virtual reality helmet? Oh my God. And of course, the screen that's on the arcade game when we get to the real gunship is the heads-up display that he uses to shoot the bad guys.
And it can be explained away in universe as well because of the fact that this arcade game was created by Robert Preston's alien character Centauri. So even though nothing like that existed on Earth at the time in real life, well, this isn't real life now, is it? So it came from the stars. So it was. I thought that was a really novel concept and a really fresh way of sort of getting the hero out of off of Tatooine, so to speak.
The other fun factor to that is that when they take him away, they leave in his place a replica of him to be him, so that nobody knows he's gone. And supposedly when they first showed the movie in a test screening, the audience responded so favorably to the humorous interplay of this robot that wasn't quite really him and was giving away the game to the real humans that they went back and shot more scenes with them like that. And if you look at those scenes, you will see that Lance Guest looks different. And the reason is that when the regular principal photography shut down, he had his hair cut shorter. So he's wearing a wig in a lot of those scenes that's very obvious.
You know what? I picked up on a difference. I did not realize that was actually what it was.
And apparently he was really sick, and they had to do a lot more makeup to make him look lively, so to speak.
Well, this scene right here is when that robot is in his bed, like regenerating into Lance Guest. And I will
Right.
tell you that as a kid, this jump scare freaked me out. I'm not gonna lie. This still kind of gives me a bit of the heebie-jeebies a little when I'm looking at it right now. Honestly, I think so. I know I'm pretty sure Lauren, you and Lou are quite fond and positive about this movie. I I went like rewatching it again. And maybe I went into it a bit too harshly, but I left with mixed feelings. Like it felt I didn't remember it being quite so derivative, I suppose, especially of Star Wars as I was watching it. There were a lot of times where I was like, wow, it felt as though somebody saw that scene of Luke and Han in the cockpit of A New Hope shooting out the TIE fighters and thought, let's make a movie of that. But I think I almost preferred the scenes in the trailer park over the actual sci-fi.
Well, see, this is what I was going to say is that it has so much heart and so much. Frankly, it's a great love story. It has wonderful poignancy and heart that I'd kind of forgotten was there because I was always so blown away by the fact that for its time, this was mountains ahead of every other special effect. This was the first feature film ever to not use any spaceship models. The only thing they built were obviously the sets of the cockpits for them, and then I saw where they apparently built like a landing gear strut to put in the foreground of a shot where they're walking away from it to give you that sense of tying it all together. But these were entirely polygons being generated by a Cray supercomputer, the biggest computer on Earth at the time, although by our current standards, again, it was pretty primitive. And they were actually writing the software and figuring out how to do it as they're making the movie. This is a $15 million computer. I read that it required $12,000 a month for the electricity bill to run it.
Wow.
And another 50 grand a month in maintenance. So this was not an economical proposition, but they did it, and God bless them for doing it because it changed the world. It really did.
What's funny about it is when you look at pictures of it, that actually looks like a science fiction prop from this era of movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say this looks like it just came out of the last Starfighter. But I mean, like that cost as well makes it even more incredible that they were able to do it for only $15 million. That's amazing. But did this movie come out after Tron? I'm pretty sure it did.
I think so.
But Tron used the the wireframe stuff for a lot of the backgrounds and things, but
Okay.
It did not put everything, not only the umpteen zillion polygons involved in generating those spaceships, but also the ability to make the light sources reflect in the right direction.
Right.
That was a big deal with this. Let's see. I have here somewhere for people who are computer nuts. This ran on on Fortran, for God's sakes. That'll take you back. And it was 64 megabytes of RAM, and let's see.
Wow.
Which at the time was an astronomical amount of memory.
Oh, yeah. And 1,200 megabytes of, there's so many numbers here that only computer people, it's the old frequency so high only your dog can hear them situation. It was a primitive, silly, and it's interesting, this cost $15 million plus the cost of the discs, and they mentioned that in 1985, Bell Labs bought one of these for $10.5 million. But they got $1.5 million back in trade-in credit for their previous Cray. It's like used cars.
Oh my!
Tommy, you were asking about how fondly we thought of this movie, and I had some kind of fond memories of it from being young, but I didn't really remember a lot of it. And I would agree that I think the trailer park scenes are actually some of the better scenes in the movie. It's actually kind of a charming premise. It looks like, well, this isn't such a bad place. You get a nice little community here with all of these eccentric characters, and it's played with a lot of heart. I think that's what I get out of the movie is the heart of it.
Yes.
But when I was talking to my folks about it this morning, there are some other movies that were released around the same time with similar premises. One of them is The Explorers, and in a lot of ways, this movie felt to me like a scene out of The Explorers where they're taking their junkyard ship and they're flying it over a drive-in that's playing a science fiction movie that's obviously low budget at the time. and everybody just kind of thinks that it's part of the science fiction show.
Yeah.
This movie would have been a great movie to see at a drive-in if they still existed. You know, it's not one that you're really going to be paying a lot of attention to. It's not something that's going to change your world. But if you want to go out and spend a fun evening and eat some popcorn and spend some time with your friends and have a conversation while you're watching a movie, this wouldn't be a bad one to do it to.
Which is why if you go online and look this movie up, you'll find umpteen what would you call them? Not pixie dusters, star dusters, whatever. Talking about, there's talk of a sequel, and they go through the whole history of the rights to it. And supposedly, Kurt Russell and his son want to make a remake of it. I don't think every damn movie has to have 43 more sequels made out of it. They stand alone and they work or they don't work, and you go on from there. I wouldn't make another one of these, not because I thought it was bad, but because it is of a time and of a place and of a style that updating it, you would lose some of that charm, I believe.
I think that's true. I mean, if you take a look at it's obvious they wanted to go for the Star Wars audience, but they didn't have the Star Wars budget. And I think it's hilarious that when he first gets up to Rylos and you see all of these other alien recruits, there's like 9 of them, something like that.
Yeah,
and it's really bad alien prosthetics and everything.
Yeah.
And you get that one scene with them, and then he denies the call. He goes back to Earth, and of course, they're all completely destroyed so that you don't have to see them again in the rest of the movie. It really does have that, this is low-budget 50s style science fiction movie making 30 years later.
I read one anecdote about making the movie that said the first time Robert Preston met Dan O'Herlihy, who plays the navigator sidekick teacher to our hero, he was in the full makeup as this reptilian thing. And supposedly Preston said, yes, I recognize you instantly. You just have one of those faces.
Well, you joke about that, but and so the character's name is Grig. Yeah. I'm going to pull him up right here. But
his makeup is pretty good.
Very good. Very good, especially around the eyes and the fact that it has a little sweat sheen to it through the whole movie.
I felt that he stole the show. I felt like, more than Robert Preston. I mean, Robert Preston was a tour de force, but
he's not in it very much. Grig is central to the plot.
Grig is central to the plot, and all of his mannerisms, even that sort of wheezing, like, the way he laughs.
Yeah.
It really humanized. It made the character real, and I found him to be like probably more charismatic than the main lead, Alex Rogan, if I'm going to be very honest with you.
Yeah, well, the difference in their attitudes, Alex is shocked and amazed at all these alien cultures. Grig recognizes how completely different his culture is to Earth's, but he finds it charming and amusing, and it's just one more in the panoply of cultures he's encountered.
But, going back to what you were saying, though, is the fact that I would argue that maybe a sequel could be warranted because the Emperor wannabe was clearly shown getting into an escape pod.
Yeah, they let him get away at the end, which plants the sequel possibilities, and I'm sure that was why that happened. But I think that's a bad idea, and certainly a sequel is a better idea than a remake.
Oh yeah,
which is what they're talking about.
I think if you were going to do a remake, if you were going to do something like that, you would have to do it in the same time period.
Yes.
I don't think you wouldn't want to modernize it. You'd want to keep you'd want to have the hair and the arcade game instead of like a home console or something like that. Keep it where it was at and just do a version that has a better budget.
So sorry guys, were they saying like this movie with Kurt Russell and his son, was it a remake or a sequel? Because
they talked about it in both directions, but they primarily talked about it with the father playing the Robert Preston part and the son playing the Alex Guest part.
Oh, nuts! Because I would be totally fine with a sequel, but a remake is I agree. Yeah. I definitely think that's not necessary.
Yeah, I think there's probably not enough of a core audience to warrant making a remake. It's like you'd have to introduce this almost as a brand new property to get the attention that I think that they would want.
And I personally am always suspicious of, as I've said before on our other discussions about Westerns and other things, remakes where they say, well, we've got a built-in audience of all these people that loved it, and we're going to make a movie that absolutely rips out everything that made the original one good. So
yeah.
Now, Lou, I wanted to ask you, because this really struck me when I was watching it last night. I remembered when I was a kid that I loved the Centauri character. but I didn't remember that it was Robert Preston. I just remembered that I loved his voice. And so when I watched it last night, as soon as he showed up, I went, that's the Music Man. And so I looked it up, and he was born in 1919, and he died shortly after this movie came out. And I just wondered, do you get a sense of what must this have been like for him? To have gone from playing somebody like the Music Man to being in this weird science fiction movie.
But see, my question is, did the writer write it with that kind of a character in mind, and therefore did they say, who we need?
Well, sure. I think they wanted them to play exactly the same character. I'm just curious, what do you think the mindset would have been for him? Do you think that this would have been...
Well, because
it's just a part, or is it just is this a profoundly odd thing for him?
I would say it would have been odd had he not done just before this or shortly before this Victor Victoria playing basically that same kind of guy. That's what he got known and loved for. And, if the audience wants you to be that, by God, be that. It's paycheck. So I don't know.
I mean,
but like I say, the guy in Victor Victoria has that same kind of broader than life salesmanship attitude to him too.
Tommy, there's a question I wanted to ask you too, and that is, and this may not be something that you would be familiar with, so I'm kind of cheating here. I want to know, did you recognize the female lead in this movie?
You know what? She looked really, really familiar to me, and I know I've seen her in other things afterwards, and I couldn't really place it, but she struck me as the typical hot 80s girlfriend. Yep. I guess is the best way to say it.
She played a lot of those, and I'm betting the one that you're thinking of that you can't quite place is Weekend at Bernie's.
That's it. That's the one. Yeah, Katherine Mary Stewart. But she was in something else recently as well.
She was on Days of Our Lives for years and years.
Yeah, but I get the sense that
she's still putting stuff out.
Yeah, let me just pull her up right here. Katherine Mary Stewart. Do we have her IMDb?
She actually really hasn't changed all that much either.
No, but I mean, if that's the typical.
And
80s.
Of course, Barbara Boson, who plays his mother, was on Hill Street Blues for 5 years, 6 years.
No, it's let's see here. So she was in The Beach Girls, Last Starfighter. Wow, she's quite a discography. Night Flyers, Dudes, Weekend at Bernie's, which is the big one there. Oh, it looks like she stopped in 2017. So why am I getting this weird feeling of deja vu? I'm going to have to think about that one a little bit.
She did a lot of TV shows. She did Knight Rider and Hitchcock and Outer Limits and Hotel and...
and she's Canadian. Look at that.
There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
I want to know how anybody could miss Samurai Cowboy.
Very good question. So, okay, guys, what would you say is your favorite thing about this movie, and what would you say is, give perhaps your critique of it, I suppose. Well, let's start with Lorn on this one.
Well, I think what my son gravitated to, and I think I did too on this watch, was all of the comedic bits with Beta, the android that's replacing the main character. There's a scene when the main character gets back after he refuses the call initially, and he approaches his girlfriend, and she outright slaps him and says that, "I told you I wasn't speaking to you," and he has no idea why. And it's because while he was gone, she tried to initiate a romantic encounter with Beta, who didn't understand why she was sticking her tongue in his ear. And he apparently said something not so complimentary and offended her. And that's all funny because he just doesn't get it. He doesn't know what this is all about. There's another minute in the movie where he has to go to a beach party with them, and he's sort of trying to fit in there. She's frustrated because he's just not getting any of her advances. And so he turns up his ears' sensitivity so he can hear some of the woo pitching that's going on from a sleeping bag adjacent to theirs. And he starts repeating whatever the other guy says, and it's going great.
Until the other guy says, all those other girls didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wrong thing to say. Speaking of all those guys in the gang, I never remember seeing him, even when I just watched it again and was looking for him. But apparently Will Wheaton is in one of those scenes.
Yeah.
And actually had lines that got cut. So shut up, Wesley.
And so, Lauren, what would you say is one of the areas which kind of fell flat with you on this?
Well, yeah, I hate to critique this because I try and take the position that you don't critique a movie based on the quality of its special effects. It's my premise is always you judge it on the story and the characters, and if that's working, then you give the filmmaker the grace to go with what they were trying to do because they're entertaining you. You know, you have to. It's a partnership between the filmmakers and the audience. I had a real hard time with some of the makeup for the aliens. It's like all of the, it's like they all have these kind of large foreheads and a fringe of hair around it, and I'm like going, come on, guys, that's a little weird.
When you think about all the alien races we've seen that were done well, that one not so much. I would agree.
It looked like they took the extra pieces from the Exeter character from This Island Earth, and slapped them on a whole bunch of people.
Or it's like if you made all of the Munchkins from the Wizard of Oz tall, No,
it's a merger between the Munchkins and the Ferengi. That forehead,
there you go.
with a little bit of premature balding hair fringe around the edges. I guess I don't know.
I mean, I will say though that again, going back to the trailer park. The alien that they had sent down to the trailer park to come and hunt down Alex and then Beta, this guy right here, that's a scary design. I will not. What was
fun about him is he had binoculars that were super offset to match how wide his eyes are.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true.
That was a nice piece of prop making on somebody's part.
But then you get like stuff like this guy right here, and it's and then these kind of Jem'Hadar-ish types of folks. And I never made that connection. And the Jem'Hadar are from Star Trek, obviously, but I never made that connection before about the one eye heads-up display, I suppose you would call it. Yeah. And the Jem'Hadar, like there was a lot of inspiration there, I think. But these are the aliens, like the main.
There's an interesting comparison. They just said Last Starfighter, but that's not the Last Starfighter.
No, that's
one of the gamesters of Triskelion from Star Trek.
Yeah,
the guy in the middle.
And then the part with Preston when he's in his car and he's taking his eyes out to clean them.
Oh yeah.
And you see his actual glowing face. Like this was kind of scary too. This was a bit of a jump scare to me as well.
What about the guy that Alex trips over his tentacles or whatever they are?
Oh yeah, that guy. Where is he?
That's another good scene. Sorry for stepping on your
whatever they are. Yeah.
The Bugatti. This guy right here. It's kind of like a little mini Cthulhu, I suppose.
Don't Bugatti that joint.
Don't Bugatti that joint. Yeah. But Lauren, I take your point. You don't want to judge a movie by its special effects or
in this case, makeup. Yeah.
Makeup and whatnot, but I think I would judge this movie a little bit, and the reason why I'll just sort of say where I'm trying to go with this is that you get all this build up in this film about how Alex is the last starfighter, and a starfighter being someone out of the billions of species, a very rare few who can ever get up to this level of skill or intuition or je ne sais quoi, which allows them to pilot these amazing Gunstars. And then you spend most of the movie with him in the Gunstar, kind of hiding in this like meteor. You expect this giant battle with this armada, but then they kind of sneak up on the mothership and they shoot it from behind. And then you do have that death blossom at the end of the movie. But I felt that the cost, the budget, and the restrictions of the CGI for the time limited the payoff of seeing the Starfighter really sort of get like be what everything that it was hyped up to be for the entire film. So in that sense, I would critique it.
Yeah, sure, and that's all true. But the thing that I'm pointing out is you actually picked the perfect picture here to highlight. Oh no, go
Sorry,
back.
hang on. I'll bring it back.
This guy.
Right here.
Yeah, this guy is basically the president of Rylos or whatever he is.
Ambassador.
And this picture is from the end of the movie. His head shape changes. Here it's square. Earlier in the movie it's round. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like, I'll accept a lot, guys, but I'd appreciate it if you kept his skull at least the same shape.
Well, if we're really critiquing this movie based on skull shape, we're probably taking it more seriously than it ever intended or needed to be.
Yeah.
But, there's some very, very good design things in this, and I was watching it
Like that scepter.
especially, well, I'm talking about as a director, it's first of all very well done as far as David Mamet in that book that I referred you guys to talks about it's about choosing the shots and the order of the pictures that tell the story, even if you didn't have any dialogue. It's very well done that way, especially at the beginning when it's giving you that sort of slice of life around the trailer park stuff. It's very carefully chosen. But the thing I'm talking about is what you're looking at right there on the right. We have all seen, going back to World War I, World War II movies, two-seater fighter craft, and usually they're either side by side or right behind each other. But the way they designed this, where one is above the other, let them do all of these shots up and through so you could get them both in the frame and still have it work, which gave the actors, they didn't have to turn to each other or look over each other, and it really, really tied them together in a wonderful team.
Limits the number of shots you have to do, too, which saves money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was really clever design for storytelling beyond that, because it just it shows you how the mentor is guiding the mentee, and yet obviously Greg can't do the shooting or he'd be in the front seat. So
Yeah. No, it was a really nice design choice. And just on that note in general, I do have to give some love for the design of the Gunstar.
And that's Ron Cobb, and people know him from a lot of films, who designed all this stuff, and as they said, was able to render on paper, and then they'd go through and point by point feed it into the computer, and it became a 3D wonder as far as all the different polygons and the light reflections and all the rest of it.
But I just feel that it's this really nice, unique design that is not really derivative. I mean, I guess you got the 4 points, which would kind of be X-Wing-ish a little, but you don't get that sense.
You're thinking the wrong direction. This is from an arcade game. Stand it on its end and put a bunch of aliens descending down from the top of the screen, and that thing's ripped straight out of Space Invaders.
Yeah, it does.
There you go. You're right. But I love the design of the Gunstar. If they ever came out with, a replica model or whatever, I'd probably buy it. And I thought the concept of the Death Blossom, which is this sort of multi
those opening petals, as they called them,
the opening
like
petals
here,
made a lot of sense, because oftentimes you got these designs in these spaceship and these sort of starfighters, and you kind of look at these pie-shaped slices of it, and you're thinking like, well, what the heck is in there? Just fuel or whatever. But this made it sense.
Also, the shape of it in general makes that spinning motion that the Death Blossom is work. That it's literally sending out missiles in all directions to get all of these bad guys at once, rather than having to be aiming at them or turning to match them.
Yeah. No, it's and you could really, that final shot of the 360-degree motion of the Gunstar doing the whole Death Blossom maneuver, not Blossom maneuver, sorry. You could see that, you could feel the computer, heating up the room it was in, trying to render all of that.
I
that
sent
was
you
really
a picture
well
of the cooling system, for God's sake, that they had to run on that thing, and it looks like something out of an air conditioner on a yacht with all the tubes with I guess Freon or whatever to keep the computer from blowing up.
Yeah.
This was, if this movie had only been the reason for doing all of this computer animation that changed the world, it has validity. Beyond that, it has a lot of heart, it has a love story, and it's kind of another one of those science fiction movies where the good guys shoot the bad guys. So, to me, the main story is not the story. The story is his relationship with his girlfriend, with his mother, with his little brother. That all works so beautifully, and of course with his sidekick.
I think it's a movie that has a tremendous amount of charm, and I think that's what gets it by, is that it's not well, I shouldn't say that. It's groundbreaking in the sense of what it did with special effects at the time, but it's not. You're not going to get an Oscar out of the performances in this movie or anything like that. But
nor did they ever pretend to want one, I don't think.
No, it's just completely charming, and you actually like the characters, and that sells the movie to you.
Especially nowadays with so many that, as I've said before, if suddenly everyone was run over by a truck, would you care? I think we've left out one important factor in this movie, and that's the score. By Craig Safin, who said that he wanted, quote-unquote, a Mahler orchestra and put in, like, twice as many trombones and twice as many strings. And okay, you could say it's kind of taking a tip of the hat from John Williams and the Star Wars stuff, but in its own way, it's really special. And of course, this is a guy who also did one of my other favorite movies and favorite movie scores, which is Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, with this size of an orchestra, but with Oriental accents, and then went on to a career doing Cheers. Totally different style. I mean, he got Emmy nominations for Cheers, I think 6 or 7 years in a row for the music. And you don't think of Cheers as having a score, except all the little ba-doom, ba-doom, boom before and after a scene, but it's there and it helps set the mood. But the music in this thing is spectacular, I think.
I agree, and I think you bringing up Remo Williams is great because it's a movie that's kind of in the same category, in a way. It's not science fiction, but it is about the right budget and about the right style and with the right amount of charm, I think.
Well, if you want to talk about that movie, it made some fundamental mistakes, unfortunately, which is when you have a book series called The Destroyer that has over 150 novels out, translated into 83 languages, and you call the movie Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, somebody in marketing wasn't thinking too clearly about getting the audience to give a damn. But of course, it has great performances from Fred Ward and from Joel Grey, and I love the movie anyway. And then the other criticism, one of the two authors of the books said, we liked that they did the movie, but they gave us a villain that wouldn't be a subject for Cure, the super secret organization, but for the SEC. And that's also probably the first prominent role that Kate Mulgrew had before Voyager.
Well, she was Mrs. Columbo before that.
Well, but just very, who watched Mrs. Columbo? Mrs. Columbo was probably referred to in more Columbo episodes by Columbo without ever being seen than she was seen in the series of the same name. So
that's probably fair.
Well, Lou, what would you say is your high and low point of this film?
The high is the romance and the friendship. The low is all of those scenes at the base of the good guys endlessly briefing people when you could have said, there's the bad guy, go kill him, thank you very much, goodbye. And that set wasn't good enough to spend so much time in it, to my eye.
It really wasn't. It felt really cramped because if you notice, you had the briefing room for the 9 different aliens, like we're literally smack in the middle of the rest of the control room. And then for the entire thing to be taken out by 2 meteors and whatnot, I mean, those had to have been very, very fast meteors, number one, because they kind of came from the edge of the universe all the way over. But
of course, that was all small stuff, being done, as far as the explosions. But the set itself was big. It was done on a very big stage at MGM, and it didn't feel like it was luxurious enough to match the setting to me. It just, all of those flat panels with blinking lights without even switches to push. Tommy, you should put up that picture I sent you of the actual computer control panel for the Cray.
You can tell that what they wanted there was the Death Star briefing scene for the end of A New Hope. And instead, it felt like you had a couple dozen guys in a garage, even though it is a large set.
It felt like they were resisting, yelling, "It's a trap!"
Yeah.
Here, this is...
if you want a comparison, because it should feel like a bunker and it should feel tight, the great Star Trek Starfleet headquarters, that's the actual control panel for the Cray, with toggle switches and a couple of blinky lights and a sticker. Anyway, the scene in the Whales movie...
Voyage Home,
where they're all there and the windows being broken in and the seas are coming in. That felt like, God, we're under attack. That felt like every great World War I or World War II movie where the base is being bombarded. This felt like we got a bunch of stuff and put it in the garage and hope for the best. So that part I thought really, really let them down.
Or even just the saboteur using space C4, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And why that panel and not the others? We never got a sense of geography or purpose. It would just, okay, well, here's one near where I am. I'll stick it on and blow it up. So,
do you have any last thoughts about the movie, Tommy? I'm curious because you said you had seen this before, which kind of surprised me. I didn't think this would be one you'd be familiar with.
Come on.
No, seriously, I thought this was one you probably wouldn't know. So, I'm curious, had you seen it recently, or was this a rewatch for you after a long absence?
So this is probably like the third or fourth time I think I've seen it. I saw it soon after it came out originally, and like I said, as a youngish kid, there were some of those scenes kind of like scared me a little bit. The part with Centauri, with Beta regenerating and whatnot. I was just, the jump scares and all that. And then I saw it again, I think probably when I was in my early teens, and now most recently now. And everything you guys are saying is on point. It does have heart. It does have a certain mystique to it that we don't really see in films these days anymore. But at the same time, maybe I went into it and I'm thinking I might have been a bit too harsh about it, because I found myself kind of nitpicking things. Like, for example, the meteors, the sort of the lack of action with the Gunstar at the end, and even just sort of the things like the main character. You can almost hear him at the beginning of the film saying, "But I really want to go to Tashi Station to get some power converters with my friends," right? And so there were some parts there where I hadn't realized how derivative it was, and it annoyed me a little bit.
I'll tell you what, it's a blessing and a curse that it got made because they wanted to try and do Star Wars, but it got made trying to be that kind of clean outer space that Star Wars brought to us with all the white shit, and it didn't work because it became sterile because there was so much heart going on to contrast it back on Earth. And I just had a thought, and I thought, when was that? And I looked it up. Do you know what came out the same year as this that's the total opposite?
Enemy Mine.
Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh, that too. Sure.
Okay, which is a movie we should do sometime. But look at the total difference in attitude with aliens and invasion of Earth and makeup. And I mean, it's almost like, and I'm not meaning to knock this movie because, like I say, I think there's a lot of good stuff. But it's like my line about the Ocean's 11 movies, which is that Clooney and company are acting cool, and Sinatra and the Rat Pack are cool.
Yeah.
Well, Buckaroo Banzai, man, is cool. Not to mention great character actors playing all the aliens. John Big Boutte and God, my mind is going nuts about all the people in that film. But anyway, the fact that those two takes on a future and on encountering aliens and on Wars of Worlds came out at the same time from totally different directions, I think this movie. Remember, this is Lorimar. And then Universal releasing it, and they're trying to be Star Wars. And it's never going to be Star Wars, and so maybe a different direction would have been a better way to go. But having said that, it changed the world for computerized CGI. There was no such thing really in the way that there was in this movie before this. And when I read the story, there's a video that I think you're going to put in the notes that I sent you, Tommy, that is the story of how this was made. And when you find out that while they're making it, they're writing the software and trying to figure it out. And there's one point where somebody comes to the producer and says, this isn't going to get done in time for your release date. They did a projection, and they said, how long will it take to do everything at the rate we're doing it now? And they said 16 months. And the movie was supposed to open in 5. And they said, don't tell me that. Go back and make it work. And they did, somehow.
Yep, Buckaroo Banzai, Enemy Mine came out a year later. This little heard movie called Return of the Jedi came out a year before.
Enemy Mine, the Louis Gossett Jr. character, looks to me like it was heavily inspired by Grigg, but I think they were made at about the same time.
Yes.
So it's likely that they just had similar art direction and weren't actually cross-pollinating.
So the movie The Explorers is something that we had mentioned earlier as well, with River Phoenix and
Ethan Hawke.
And I thought, and so I rewatched that movie today with my son, and he loved it. He was glued to it. So that was really encouraging, and I think I will try to get him into a couple more of these. Did it do any
business? Did it do any business? Because I remember it as being just negligible.
I think it was one of those that didn't do well on release, but became a cult classic after the fact.
Well, let's see here. So, per Wikipedia, it had a budget of $25 million and only made $9.9 million.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Which, whether that's the movie or whether that's how they sold it, either way, that's a failure in every dimension.
Well, the Explorers, I was loving it right up to the aliens. Like, I thought that these aliens right here, that was just the, oh, come on. Like it looked like they landed in Chuck E. Cheese's.
Well,
know?
but see,
that's way better than what we got in the last Starfighter.
Really? You think so?
Oh yeah.
Well, but see, to me, this is a whole movie about the little brother in Last Starfighter. This is, hey, kids want to be. Look, we all talk on this channel a lot about toys and about how boys play and how girls play and whether they play as the characters or the idea that as a kid you want to be Han Solo.
Yeah.
You don't want to be Han Solo. You don't want to be Short Round.
Yeah.
You like Short Round, but so this was a whole movie predicated on the idea of kids could be Star Wars heroes too, in a way.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't know what audience it got, but I don't think a lot of kids. Well, I mean, I don't know. You said your son loved it, and more power to him. But to me, I don't want to be what I am. I want to be what I could be or what I'll grow up to be. I mean, G.I. Joe is not a little boy toy; it's a man toy.
He-Man.
He-Man. Yes. Batman. Superman.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, only by saying, how do you explain the success of the Goonies then?
Because it's a teen comedy. Because it's here's the funny one, here's the strange one, here's the fat one, here's the skinny one, and they're all, it's an our gang movie, really.
All right.
Hey, you guys.
Yeah. And like you said about the Phantom, it's pirates, so, I mean.
Yeah, that's also true. Any movie that starts with a map has got me hooked immediately. So.
Oh, yeah, as long as they don't take 20 minutes. I still remember with a shudder of horror this thing, Black Adam, where the prologue to explain to you what the hell the plot's going to be about is easily 10 to 12 to 15 minutes of once upon a time there was a kingdom, and this guy did that, and that guy did this, and then on Tuesday they got up and they had corned beef for lunch, and then on Thursday, and you're going, get on with it already. If you have to tell me this much to understand... It's like some of the attractions, as lovely as they are to look at lately, that have endless pre-show explanation of the plot before you go into the actual ride. And I sit there going, I didn't have to do this with the other stuff. What happened here?
Lorn, you astonished me. I didn't realize you were such a fan of The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker.
We're going to have a discussion when we get done recording.
I mean, there were maps, right?
Well, but wait a minute. There's the perfect example of what I just said. How much did they have to tell you at the beginning of Star Wars? Long ago in a galaxy far, far away, boom, you're in it. Samuel Goldwyn, as I think I've said before on one of these, he said, if you want to send a message, call Western Union. And even then, it's by the word, so you better make it short.
Well, guys, what would you call this? Let's give it an official title, this type of genre of movie. What is it? 80s...
Well, but see, to me, it's about the landmark in computer-generated graphics that it was, and it happens to be a charming movie in many ways. It has its flaws, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean,
its place in movie history is not. It's one of the greatest dramas or love stories ever done, or one of the greatest war movies ever done, or whatever. Certainly not one of the greatest science fiction movies ever done, but it's one of the most important, and that deserves a certain amount of respect.
Yeah, I think that's right. I wouldn't pigeonhole it to the 80s either, because a lot of the style of it came from, 30s, 40s, 50s. I think it's just one of those. It's almost a particular kind of movie aimed at a younger audience that is wholesome. It's got a lot of heart. It's a popcorn movie. It's just there to entertain and then be forgotten. And sometimes those are fun. Yeah, it's a good summer movie.
Yeah,
for a matinee.
Or a drive-in.
It's a drive-in movie, and that makes it a little bit older kids with all that stuff with the beta unit and the girlfriend, which is fine. But it's a teenage drive-in movie, no doubt about it.
I think that's right,
gentlemen. It was a pleasure talking about this film. It was very fun to be able to watch it again, and it's especially fun to see all of the recommendations that come up afterwards when you're sort of scrolling through Amazon Prime for various other movies. That's how I ended up watching The Explorers today. It's been an honor to speak with such luminaries as yourselves on these wonderful films. It's certainly been expanding my repertoire of movies to have seen, and opening me up to new films that I really have to go out and make some time for.
Absolutely, and I think we sort of now have to go in a different direction with the next one, because we've kind of It's funny how many times when I looked this movie up today, the words space opera were used by descriptors. And, there's opera movies and there's space movies, and let's do something different. We've talked about a few things. I'm almost half joking, half serious, saying, Tommy, go look at the list of the 100 greatest movies ever made and tell me how many of them you haven't seen, and we'll pick one of those.
That's a good idea, actually. But what's even better, though, is to ask the members, give us your thoughts. Let us know, what do you want us to see? What do you want us to talk about next that is not a space opera? Give us those comments. Tell us what is in your own top 100 list.
And
happy to take a look.
One that I've been musing about that I've shared with you guys privately, and I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to spoil it, is the Cold War thriller. And the particular one that I mentioned I think is pretty special because, again, amazing music and an all-star cast, and it has a kind of curious place in, although it doesn't take place there at all, in Las Vegas history, which is a teaser to everybody.
Something that might be fun to do as well, because I was thinking as we mentioned this, I'm going to confess something right now. I've never seen Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh my!
I know there's a lot of classic movies that I haven't seen that I think would probably surprise some people. So maybe what we should do one of these times is actually put up a list of movies that many people consider classics that we haven't seen, and maybe let the audience vote on it and say, what would you like us to see and get a fresh reaction to?
Oh, that's a great idea.
I'll tell you what you do first, Lorn. Before you actually watch the movie, go find on YouTube the clip of the closing credits with the music.
Okay.
Buckaroo Banzai. Trust me, it's one of the things they didn't have to do. They didn't have to spend the money on. It was absolutely superfluous to the movie, and yet it's just plain swell. I mean, it's great music anyway, but it's the cast out at what's called the Van Norman Dam in Sepulveda, and it's fun. It's just plain fun.
All right, I'll do that before I watch the movie.
Do that.
My curiosity is piqued. All right, guys. Well, listen. Have a wonderful night. From us to you, thank you for listening. As Pro says, you are the electricity that drives this channel, especially you guys, the members. Really, really grateful for that. For every single view, for every single comment, for every single like. It warms the cockles of my long, cold, and barren heart. So thank you so much. Guys, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Or a week, or whatever it is for whenever this thing plays. Take care.
Sounds good.
Good night.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on T3PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it, and if you want to enjoy episodes of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WTW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing topic? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you for joining us here on T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WTW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.